I think the physical evidence in this case is slim. We have the video and photographs of her in Walmart. We have, Ashley's story and the story from the people in the Walmart about the last time they saw her. And that's it. This isn't a story where we have a body and there's DNA and there's bullet casings and all the things that sometimes solve cases. We don't have any of that. This woman walked out the door of a Walmart into the night and was never seen again.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Unsolved. I'm Myles Reef. I'm here as always with my buddy Sean Cahill. This is the place where we tackle the stories that the TV networks won't touch. Unsolved homicides, missing persons cases, stories without an ending. Sean, what are we getting into today?
Hey, Myles. So today we're doing a case breakdown, which on our channel always means it's a new case, which we will be following up with interviews connected to the people involved in that case. So this is a story about a missing person. Her name is Tiffany Whitton. She was from Marietta, Georgia, and she went missing in September of 2013 after an interesting little incident at a Walmart that we will talk more about later. But basically, she went missing in a place with not a lot of people, but there were people around, right? I mean, it wasn't like someone who just kind of went into the woods and no one ever heard from them again. She went missing in sort of an urban area with her boyfriend at the time after being in a big superstore, went out the front door of that and no one ever saw her again. So it's a strange case. It remains unsolved today for a lot of really interesting reasons that we're going to lay out for you. It is one of these stories where I think there's a lot of theories, but the people really closely connected to it have started to sort of narrow in on one particular theory. With that being said, Myles, let's back up a little bit. And why don't we talk a little bit about who Tiffany Whitton was? And once we understand that, we can get into the mystery.
Absolutely. And I do think that just, before we get deep into it, this is a story where the victimology plays a big role in the response. And it's really important, I think, for us to remember that and to keep in mind that everyone deserves justice and everybody's families deserve closure. And it doesn't matter what type of lifestyle someone was living or the things that had happened leading up to something horrible possibly happening to them, because I do think that that's a big part of Tiffany's story. And you guys will see that as we get deeper into it. But I just want to say that up top that this is a story that I think really, really illustrates well that everybody deserves respect and everybody deserves closure. And everybody deserves justice under our system.
Thanks for saying
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Having said that, okay, so Tiffany was born in 1987 in a town called Kennesaw in Georgia. She did come from a divorced home. Her parents did divorce when she was very young. She was raised by her mother, Lisa. Um, Lisa says that Tiffany was always a very outgoing, very happy kid. She did tell us, and she has said in other interviews, and you guys will see, when you watch the full interview that we'll eventually put up with Lisa Daniels, that Tiffany did have issues from a young age where she was kind of mischievous, I would say, and she would steal things that weren't hers and she would hide them. So there were some issues going on. Lisa was a single mom. She had other children. She had a lot on her plate. She was aware of what was happening. She looked for help. She did all she could. But this was something that was going on when Tiffany was young, and she had some stuff going on with her personality. Let's just put it that way. She dropped out of high school, even though she had a dream that she was going to be a veterinarian. And then she had a pregnancy when she was a teenager. So Tiffany did get pregnant when she was a kid, and she did give that child up for adoption. She did have another child later on that is currently being raised by her mom, Lisa, but that comes later on in her story. So after the dropout, after getting out of high school, Tiffany did start dabbling in drugs. And from our understanding, it got serious pretty quick. This wasn't, she was smoking weed for a long time, and then, something else came along. Like she got into the heavy stuff fairly quickly. And it's the stuff that we've all heard about, and that it sort of is infecting certain communities in this country. She was using oxys, and when she couldn't get oxys, she was turning to street heroin and meth. So it was pills, and then when the pills aren't available, that leads to something else. And this is a story that I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, whether you've dealt with it personally with people that you know, or whether just hearing about it. But this is unfortunately a story that we've heard over and over again that is infecting this country, that people start with these prescription pills, and then that leads to heroin addiction, and then that leads to meth. And then, you're on the street and you're a drug addict. So Tiffany was dealing with this from a fairly young age. She did get hooked into a drug world, and she started getting some small arrests. She was known to shoplift. She was stealing. She was obviously getting drug charges related to her addiction problems. She wasn't doing serious time, but she was getting picked up and she was going through the system, and that happened multiple times. 2011, Tiffany's involved in a home invasion, and she's caught. So she did serve a short prison sentence for that, and that was actually the Tiffany's story that she gave for the home invasion was that the people that she had broken into owed her money, and so she was trying to get her money back. The police believed that it was a drug thing, this was somehow wrapped up around drugs, whether that means that Tiffany was telling the truth and these people were holding out on her cash, or whether she was trying to steal the drugs. I'm not actually sure of the details of that, but police do believe that the home invasion was related to drugs. And Tiffany's story was that she was trying to get back what was hers by breaking into these people's homes. Either way, she did a sentence for that. She did a stretch. And that leads us to late 2012, which is when Tiffany gets out for that charge.
Yeah, so this is where it gets interesting. I mean, obviously, it's already been kind of interesting, but I like what you said earlier, Miles, about sort of remembering to keep these people's humanity alive. Because when I look at Tiffany's story and the struggles that she had, it's like, how did this little girl who wanted to grow up and be a vet, who helped animals and worked with animals, and has a good education, wind up being in prison at this young age? Well, it's a lot of things, right? Mainly, I think, the drugs, right? You see that people get involved in this stuff and everything in their life just starts to escalate in the wrong direction. And I think that's what was happening with Tiffany. I think she probably felt a little out of control. She had a couple of kids at a very young age, which drastically, it complicates your life, especially if the other parent isn't there to help, which I'm not actually really sure if they were, but I know that she wasn't married. So her life was just juggling a lot of responsibility very young, and the drugs enter the equation, and things just start to spin out for her. So she enters prison for this home invasion. Like Myles said, she gets out in late 2012, and she's faced with what a lot of people who go through this are faced with. It's hard to get your life back on track with that in your past, right? The drugs, the prison sentence, the trouble. She's lucky, and then she gets a job at IHOP, which is a really good opportunity for her to kind of reset, make some money in an honest way, and get her life on track, hopefully, to just leave that stuff in the past, which people do, but it is really hard. I'm sure all of us know at this point in America, somebody who has struggled with drug addiction, somebody who has struggled to get their life off of the wrong path and onto the right path. And that's where Tiffany was here. But then something happens that unfortunately seems like it pulls her down again. And it is that she winds up getting into a dispute with her roommate that she's living with, after she gets out of prison. She gets kicked out of that living situation. And somewhere in this time, she winds up meeting a gentleman named Ashley. Now, Ashley comes with some baggage of his own. Unfortunately, this isn't the guy that seems like he made her life cleaner. In fact, it was sort of the opposite. Ashley had a rap sheet that was more serious even than Tiffany's. Like, Tiffany had been in trouble for some petty theft. I think the home invasion was the most serious thing she had ever done. Meanwhile, Ashley was believed to be associated with prison gangs. He had previous drug charges and weapons charges, just like much more serious stuff. And probably the worst possible thing here was that he was still involved in drugs. And Tiffany really needed to be getting away from that stuff. And instead, the person she wound up spending the most time with and entering a relationship with was heavily into it. So unfortunately, now Tiffany is sort of being pulled back into the bad habits and negative things that she was trying to get away from. This leads to her ultimately stealing money from her job at IHOP, this thing that looked promising for a moment. Now she's getting fired from there and in trouble. And her family sort of stops hearing from her. There's these stints of time that start to open up where no one can hear from her, that she doesn't pick up their calls, she doesn't see them, but then she'll pop back up weeks later. People I think who have been familiar with, folks that have like really serious drug problems might recognize this pattern. This is sort of what happens when you drive down the streets of a lot of American cities and the rougher neighborhoods and you see the people who are like living that lifestyle. That's what it looks like. These people haven't talked to their parents in weeks. They're alive and they might be okay, not really okay, but they're not dead. And then they'll come back. Maybe they need money. Maybe they just are off drugs momentarily and want to touch base with their family. But this is what starts to happen in Tiffany's life. And it's really hard for her mom, Lisa, to the point where some boundaries start to be drawn. And Lisa has to sort of not cut off all contact with Tiffany, but the way that this relationship is working is not to her satisfaction anymore. And it just gets worse and worse to the point where eventually the only person in Tiffany's family who's able to remain in contact with her, even though it's sporadic and kind of difficult, is her grandmother. The contact is sporadic. It's not like a check-in every day. But a lot of people in Tiffany's life are too frustrated to deal with this whole thing that's going on. And the grandmother is actually the only person who ever even meets Ashley, the new boyfriend, even though it's brief. It's not like they have a relationship and they get to know each other, but she does actually meet him where no one else in Tiffany's life does meet this person who becomes very important to the story later. Myles, why don't I kick it to you? Because I think we should probably talk about where this whole thing is headed.
Yeah, so I think the timeline is really important here. So what Sean just mentioned, that Tiffany's grandmother does meet Ashley, that happens on September 8th, 2013. So they come over to her house to do laundry. Actually, sorry. Uh, so they meet the grandmother while doing laundry at a public laundromat. And Ashley is with Tiffany, and he also has his daughter with him. And that is the last time that anybody from Tiff that is the last time that anybody from Tiffany's family actually sees her. Is this interaction at this laundromat with the grandmother on September 8th. So let's fast forward a few days. So September night of September 12th, morning of September 13th, Tiffany and Ashley, by all accounts, start their evening at a friend's house. This guy's name was Stephen Weinstein. He was a friend of Ashley's. He was a fellow drug user. They're partying. They're doing hard drugs. And that's sort of where they start out. About 1 o'clock in the morning, Tiffany and Ashley go to Walmart in Marietta, which is a bit of a drive from where they are, right? From where Stephen's house is. Now, we do have surveillance footage. We could show some of it right now. We have stills from it. By all accounts, Tiffany was very fidgety on camera. She was showing signs of possibly shoplifting, and she looked high. So Ashley actually bought some stuff with cash while they were leaving, but Tiffany gets stopped around 2 a.m. when they're trying to leave by the loss prevention officers, basically security, right? They stop Tiffany at the door. She doesn't react well to this, and she takes off. And basically, she leaves her shoes and her purse and just disappears into the night. Now, you'll see by the stills, or you'll see by the footage that we're showing, Ashley doesn't seem to do anything at this instance. He doesn't try to stop it. And then he just kind of follows her off into the night. So that is the last time that Tiffany Whitton is seen by anybody, as far as we know. That is the last account of her being on this earth as a person, and someone actually interacting with her, which is these security guards stopping her at the door and then her running off into the evening, right? So the Walmart security guys, at this point, they figure she's going to come back because they have her purse, right? So that's the story that they've told over and over again, that they held on to her stuff and they figured she would come back for it and they would deal with it. She never comes back. Ashley's story after the fact of what he says happened that night is that he actually, well, for one thing, he tells some people that he pulls a weapon. I don't remember if it was a gun or a knife, but he pulls a weapon on the security guards and tells them they better back off of his girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. There's no evidence of this on camera. Obviously, you guys can see he doesn't pull a weapon on them. He doesn't stop them. He doesn't even get in the middle of it. The other thing is that he said that he went off and he just searched for her and searched for her and searched for her, and he couldn't find her. There is one eyewitness account, and this is from Tiffany's ex-roommate, whose name was Sheila Fuller. Now, she was working at the IHOP where Tiffany had gotten fired from, and Ashley did show up there between 2:30 and 3 o'clock that morning. So you figure if it was, let me just check the timeline. If it was 2 o'clock when the security guards confronted her, and it was 2:33 between there when Ashley shows up at the IHOP and says that he's looking for Tiffany and, hey, have you seen her? Right now, take that for what you will. This is Ashley's story. That he's out there looking for her. Is this part of a cover that he's going and making contact with people to create an alibi? This is a guy who's had a lot of experience with the law. Who knows? We'll explore that more as we get further down the line, and you guys will see that the DA that we interviewed, along with Tiffany's mom, do have a lot of thoughts about this. So anyway, Ashley's got a truck that he had borrowed that's parked in the Walmart parking lot. He leaves it. He doesn't go anywhere near it. He gets picked up by Weinstein later on, and they drive around, and this is from accounts from both of them. They drive around looking for Tiffany. Then eventually Ashley goes back, gets the truck, and cleans it. Cleans out the entire truck. For what reasons? We don't know. And then he starts calling hospitals and jails, apparently, and trying to find his girlfriend. So the question is here, did Ashley actually not catch up to her and she just ran off into the night and disappeared to thin air and is just never seen again? Or did he catch up with her and perhaps something else happened, right? Why did he not get into the truck? Why did he have to call Weinstein and have him come pick him up and drive around with him instead of getting to the truck that he already had that was in the parking lot and immediately go searching? That's an interesting question. Was there something in that truck that would have gotten Ashley in trouble? This is a guy who's got multiple felonies. I believe he was on parole at this time. So any violation would have probably put him in a lot of jeopardy. So he was already on drugs. We know that. They had been partying at Weinstein's house. So, there's a lot of questions around this, right? A lot of questions around what happened. And the idea that, this young woman with no shoes and no ID just ran off into the night in a parking lot in Marietta and just disappeared into thin air and has never been seen from again. I have a really hard time believing it. I guess there's always the aliens, could have come and picked her up. And, I'm a believer, but it does seem a little strange. It seems a little strange. So what happens next, Sean?
So we will continue in a second, but I did want to point out one interesting thing. You mentioned Ashley being seen at that IHOP between like 2:30 and 3 in the morning by a friend of Tiffany's. Well, I'll put up a map here for you guys to look at. The Walmart where they were shopping and this whole thing happened at is directly across the street from this IHOP where Tiffany used to work. So Tiffany would have been really familiar with this area. And I think that there's a reason maybe that Ashley went over there. Either it was because he might have known that her friend would see him there looking for Tiffany, or maybe he was legitimately looking for Tiffany because if she ran out of the Walmart and was panicking and she didn't have her purse and she didn't have her shoes, well, right across the street, there is a place where she has a friend potentially on shift, a place she's familiar with where maybe she would feel safe. So it's hard to know what to make of that. Either Ashley's establishing an alibi for himself and he knows more about this than he's letting on, or he's legitimately looking at a place that actually does kind of make sense if you're looking in that general area. But
And
what's
it's
interesting,
also like a one place that he can get to by foot, right? Because he's not going back into that truck for whatever reasons at that moment.
which is
So,
really important, right? Yeah. Yeah.
at
And
least, and that could go either way to what you said. He could have actually been looking for her, or he could have been establishing some sort of like timeline for himself. So when he says, well, I was looking for her, oh, just ask her friend. I stopped by the IHOP, right?
right, right, exactly. So it's interesting to note. And again, one of the important things for me too is that this is just a place where Tiffany would have been familiar with the street, with the neighborhood, with everything. If there was a payphone nearby she needed to get to, she probably would have known where that was. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of strange when people disappear in familiar territory like that.
I
And I
think
think,
that's really important because
yeah,
again, her just the idea that this girl with no shoes on and no ID just disappeared into thin air in an area that she was familiar with.
Well, it's like I said at the beginning, you hear these stories where people go hiking and disappear, and it almost makes some sense, right? Because getting lost in the woods, you're screwed a lot of
Hmm.
the time. Getting lost
Yeah.
in the middle of Marietta, Georgia, right across the street from the building that you've worked at before, and a friend is there, and your boyfriend's in this building here, doesn't it very, very strange, right? So we're gonna get to maybe some theories about like how that could plug into maybe what happened, but let me continue on with the timeline here. So what's really sad about this story, besides the obvious, is that no one actually reports Tiffany missing. Ashley says that he goes home that morning after driving around and looking for her and calls morgues and hospitals. I don't know that there's any record that that ever happened. I think that that's information that we're hearing from Ashley. So maybe he did do that. Maybe he didn't. Um, we'll take him at his word for now. But basically, because Tiffany hasn't been in touch with her family, no one knows she's missing. That's the tragedy of this whole situation. Like when someone actually does disappear, those first 48 hours, as we all know now, are really important to finding them. Evidence disappears after that. People can leave. It just gets much, much harder to unravel this stuff after like 2, 3 days have gone by. But it's not until 2 or 3 months have gone by that Tiffany's family actually learns something is drastically wrong here. And it comes in the form of a letter from Walmart because Walmart doesn't call the police every time there's a shoplifter, believe it or not, and especially in this situation where they have Tiffany's ID and her purse. Like they're not really worried about like calling 911 to come get her. Now they know that they're if when they report this, the police will just go handle it because they know exactly who she is. But instead, what Walmart actually does is just send a letter saying, "Hey, we know that you shoplifted from us. You owe us this money or whatever. Come figure it out." And this letter goes to the grandmother's house.
And it's kind of it's funny because you guys will see in Lisa's interview, she calls it, I believe, the Walmart extortion letter because no matter what, whether there's proof of the amount that was supposedly shoplifted or not, they always ask for the same amount of money, and they're basically like, if you give us this money, we'll back off. So they're sending a letter looking for cash,
Yeah.
which is understandable. But apparently, this wasn't the first time that they had gotten a letter like this.
So it's not even until this letter arrives at the grandmother's house 2 to 3 months later in November um, that the family even realizes Tiffany's in trouble again. And not only do they not talk to her very much, but they realize how much trouble she's had in her past, that even this letter isn't enough for them to go, oh, something's drastically wrong, because they've seen this kind of letter before, unfortunately, seeking restitution for shoplifting, petty theft stuff. It all kind of tracks for them with the things that Tiffany's been doing and getting in trouble for. So this is sad but true. It's not until January of 2014, months and months after she went missing in September, that an actual missing persons report is filed by Lisa, Tiffany's mom, because by now they've realized, okay, this is a little too long. They've tried to find her, they've tried to contact her. Nobody can. Ashley doesn't know where she is. So this is like now escalated officially into maybe this is more than she's on a bender or whatever.
And she missed
Something
the holidays.
she
And
missed
I
the
think I think
holidays.
for Lisa that was a big thing that she would have come home on Christmas for her kid, and she
Yeah.
did. And I think that was what kind of pushed Lisa to finally say, "Hey, we have to figure this out. This might not just be one of her usual disappearances."
So it's after these holidays come and go with not a peep from Tiffany that Lisa, her mother, does decide to go to the police and file a missing persons report in early January of 2014.
Now, Lisa going in to see the cops knows that if she just shows a picture of her beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, daughter and says, "Hey, my daughter's missing. I'm really worried," the cops will probably jump right on it. But she also knows that once they start digging into her background, they're going to say, "Hey, how come you didn't tell us about all these prior arrests? How come you didn't tell us that she's done time? How come you haven't told us that she's got a drug history?" Right? So Lisa comes in as an open book and tells the police everything. She's like, my daughter has a really troubled past. She's got a history with criminality. She's got a history with drug use, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think that, something is wrong. Now, I'm not going to say for sure what happens here, but it does seem that the initial response by the detectives that she first talks to is what she was worried would happen, which is that, oh, your daughter's got a lot going on. She probably is going to come back. She just took off, et cetera, et cetera. But Lisa's already gone through that. That's the thing. Like we've heard that so many times with missing persons cases where, the initial response from the police is, well, this is a young person. They probably, you don't know everything that's going on in their life, whatever, whatever. Lisa had already taken months of waiting after they had received the letter from Walmart and saying, well, I know my daughter, I know her history. We're going to wait it out. It's not till after the holidays that she's like, okay, I'm really concerned. This is unlike even her. And then she goes to the police, but then the police still saying, yeah, she's probably going to show up. And they don't really show a whole bunch of concern at first.
And unfortunately, I mean, this is just a reality of urban policing. When you have people who deal with an area where there are a lot of people on the skids and on the streets, and there's a lot of family members looking for these people, it's pretty common for them to later turn up. So the police, like Myles said, are kind of like, well, let's just wait and see what happens here, which is really frustrating, right, for Lisa, because Lisa's now realizing months have gone by that are unaccounted for. It's not like her daughter went missing last weekend. It might have been like 4 or 5 months ago at this point. So something good actually does happen, and this case gets reassigned at the end of January. So just a couple weeks after the initial missing persons report, to a detective named Johnny Mueller, and she really takes this seriously. She is very concerned that something bad may have happened to Tiffany, and she's willing to look into it. So initially, this looks really great because it's gone from the don't worry about it pile to the like, no, this is super urgent. There's a missing mother here. And then that is the way we should be looking at this, right? I think it's so easy for people to get cynical when someone has a rap sheet, when someone has a troubled past. Maybe they've done time, they have drug problems. Everybody wants to brush that person off. But what's awesome is this detective did not. She was able to look at it and say, no, this is a person with a mom who is also herself a mother. We need to find her immediately. And so things really get kicked off here. And what happens is they start to re-look into the story surrounding the last time Tiffany was seen. And the person who tells them that story, of course, is Ashley, because they're able to take that restitution letter from Walmart, and that's the last on paper thing that anybody has of Tiffany, and go talk to him about it. And that's when they hear the story about what he did that night, the phone calls he supposedly made to the morgue and the hospital in the morning. And automatically, things here start to not really make sense, right? Why didn't you report her missing yourself if you're her boyfriend, Ashley? Why did you drive around that night looking for her, and then what, you just kind of gave up and said, oh, she'll turn up later? You never contacted her family. I mean, there's just things that you would expect someone to do in that situation that he
Why
didn't.
did you leave that truck sitting all night in the
Yeah,
park?
so he calls a friend to pick him up and drive around, even though he has a vehicle there that him and Tiffany took to Walmart. So it's just odd. And the police now begin to wonder, what's up with this guy's story, right? We know he's got a rap sheet. We know he's done time. Is it possible that he may know more about Tiffany's disappearance than he's letting on? After all, so much of the time after the shoplifting incident is unaccounted for. He's the only one that would have known where he was, and we're kind of having to take him at his word about what he was doing, except for that moment at IHOP when the friends saw him. But there's a long time where that is basically unaccounted for, and we're taking this guy at his word.
So the next big development comes in March that same year. They're not getting anywhere with Ashley in the investigation, and Mueller really thinks that he may have something to do with Tiffany's disappearance and may know where she is. So since they can't do anything directly related to Tiffany's case, they decide to go after him for drugs. So what they do is they get a warrant and they actually do a raid at the house that Ashley's living at. And it's with a drug warrant. They get illegal drugs, they seize guns. They also do a search. They get guns, they get drugs, and then a couple of months later, obviously, sorry. So they don't have any probable cause related to Tiffany to go after Ashley, but what they can do is they can get a warrant for drugs. So they raid Ashley's house with this warrant. They seize illegal drugs, they seize weapons. He's locked up. A couple of months later, in July that year, July 2014, they actually get a warrant to search Ashley's mother's property with dogs, actually cadaver dogs, looking to see if they can find any human remains, which, I don't have to spell it out why they're doing that. They don't find anything on her property. I do believe that that was based on a tip that the police had received that, Ashley may or may not have said that, he had something had happened and he had disposed of Tiffany's body on his mother's property. Fast forward a little bit, 2015, Ashley's convicted on the drugs and gun charges from the raid at his house. He gets a 10 to 20 year sentence for that, right? So he's locked up now. So he's in jail. And I guess what everyone's hoping is that maybe this guy will start talking at some point and explain what happened to Tiffany, because again, he's the only person who seems to know. He's the only person who seems to have seen her. Later that year, an informant, people start coming out of the woodwork, right, with information about Tiffany, which tends to happen with these cases, right? They get in the news, they start getting calls. So an informant tells the cops that Tiffany's body is actually in a barrel and that it's been buried in a lake. The cops do act on that. They bring out sonar. They do a search. All they find is construction debris in the lake. A year later, in 2016, the case is actually labeled as a cold case and it's handed over to Cobb County Cold Case Squad. So that's sort of where it is as of 2016. There's a big article written in Esquire by a gentleman named, I'm going to mispronounce his last name probably, so I apologize, but Tom Junod, who sort of highlighted the lack of media attention that this case got, even though she was the profile of the missing attractive white woman. It's interesting because there is this thing of like missing white woman syndrome, where, these cases sometimes when it's an attractive young white woman, it becomes very, very high profile. And sometimes with, an African-American girl or a Native American girl, it's not the same level of media attention. And I think I haven't read the article by Tom Junod, but I believe what his thesis was basically saying that, like, Tiffany was kind of like ignored because of her past, right? Because of her criminal history, because of her drug history, all of that. So she's an exception to that rule, right? Even though, as you can see from her photographs, she certainly, like, profile wise matches the person that should have gotten a lot of media attention. The idea is that her past made her less sympathetic to the press, right? So in the article, there is one revelation, which is that Ashley says in the article that he had her phone. And the truth is that the phone was left at Walmart. So what that means, who knows?
Well,
A
it's an
couple of
inconsistency in the story, which is worth pointing out, right? I mean, that's just another one of these things that's like, why say that if it's not true? It's an odd thing when you catch somebody being dishonest in a missing persons case. I think that's the significance for me anyway. I don't know
yeah,
what the ultimate answer is or why, but it's hard not to notice. Okay, that's weird. Your girlfriend's missing and you're claiming you have her phone, but actually Walmart has it. Well, why would you say that, right?
yeah, and not to compare it to another case that we've been covering quite a bit, but that to me is a little bit different than what time was it when I went outside my house to put up a poster.
Right.
Like, I don't have this physical object that has all our information in it. Do you have it or do you not have it? Like, that's a pretty big deal.
Well,
Uh,
for a missing person, the police would want to see that phone immediately.
right,
Who's been texting her? What has she been talking about? Can we
right.
get into her messaging apps and her email and her phone? I mean, yeah, so that would be like a huge piece of evidence, right? Not like, oh, I thought I put that poster up at 6 o'clock. Actually, it was 7. That's a different kind of lie or mistruth, I think, than this. This is a pretty big deal to me.
Yeah. Now, one other thing that happened before the article was written, that in January 2014, Tiffany had a half brother named Blake, and he actually told everybody that she had called him in January 2014. It's never been verified, but that's what he said. And obviously, it wasn't from her number, so there was no way to track that. Um, so where does that leave us? It sort of leaves us with what may have happened, because this is a real mystery. And this is a girl who walks out of a Walmart into the night, into early morning, and is literally never seen again. So what the hell happened to Tiffany Whitton? And I think this is a point where, Sean and I usually aren't in the business of speculating, but I think we'd be remiss not to, because there's absolutely there's nothing here. There, like other cases, like there's stuff that you can spec. Well, was it this, or this? You know what I mean? If you look at Jennifer Kesse, it's pretty obvious that she left her, her apartment that morning to go to work, and someone did something that prevented her from reaching her job. And I think the car being driven and all that, and that being dropped off, that's clear evidence that something happened, right? And we can point to that, and then it's a question of who and why. But with Tiffany, the only who that we can possibly look at based on what we know is Ashley. To me, that's the only who. It's literally the only who. The why is interesting, and as you guys will see when you watch our long form interviews, I'm not sure. We're still debating who would put up first because they're both really really interesting. But the fact that we do have such a great interview with the prosecutor, and he is someone who's also been a cop, and he has a lot of thoughts about this and is very open with us in his interview. We might put that up first just so you guys can see, what the progression of the investigation has been and how hard these guys have been working on it. Once it got on track. But I would say, to me, it seems like something happened. She didn't run off into the night. She didn't get kidnapped by aliens. Something happened between her and Ashley. Perhaps he used that truck as storage, and that's why he left it alone. Who knows? But or maybe the truck was just filled with drugs and he was worried that the cops were coming. But something happened. He was very upset, and it probably wasn't meant to happen, but it probably escalated. And I would imagine that there's other people involved who disposed of Tiffany's remains. I don't think Tiffany's alive. I think Lisa agrees with me on that. That she's not with us anymore. Something horrible happened that evening, and Ashley is probably responsible or at least involved. And there are probably other people that are involved as well. And so then you get to the point of how does this case get solved? Well, if there are other people involved, then the hope is that eventually someone's going to come forward, right? Someone's going to crack, or this guy's going to get himself into so much trouble that he's going to be locked away forever, and he's just going to talk about everything that he's ever done, which sometimes happens too. I don't know how else it gets solved.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I almost want to touch on what other things could conceivably have happened, and then let's go back to why we're focused on Ashley. Could she have run out into the night and because she was on drugs and scared and confused, had tried to get in a car with a stranger, flag somebody down? It's conceivable. It seems really improbable and unlikely to me when her boyfriend is right there. She's got another friend across the street in the IHOP. Why get in a car with a stranger, right? So I'm inclined to check that one off the list as just being doesn't make a lot of sense. The only caveat being, of course, people who are on drugs sometimes make very bizarre decisions, right? So, okay, I still don't think it's very likely. Could she
There was
have?
and just to be clear what you're saying, there was a would-be murderer cruising the parking lot or
Right.
in that vicinity, and she just ran barefoot, and that would-be murderer was like, bingo, I got one. And
Yeah.
and I guess that could happen, it's certainly
Yep.
conceivable.
Yep. And the other thing, I guess, would be could she have decided that this was her moment where she needed to walk away from her life? I don't think so. I mean, look, this isn't someone who has the resources to do that. And it also is not that big of a deal. I mean, this is a person who's been in trouble for shoplifting before. When you know that the outcome of this situation is going to be a nasty letter in the mail from Walmart, why would you get on a Greyhound bus to Mexico and change your name? It doesn't make sense. It would be an
She didn't have her
overreaction.
wallet.
Didn't
She
have her
didn't have her
wallet.
phone. She
They didn't
didn't
even
have
have
her
shoes.
shoes.
You
How
know,
was
it's
she
the
getting
middle
on a
of the night.
Greyhound?
Yes. So then we turn back to, all right, well, who are the other people involved in this story that we do know about? Well, we know about her boyfriend. Even on the best of days, when the boyfriend is like an investment banker who goes to church every week, that guy's going to be the first suspect. Well, in this case, he's not an investment banker who goes to church every week. He's an ex-con who's been in trouble for drugs. He's believed to be the member of a prison gang. And so now we're wondering, okay, well, this is sort of an unsavory character, and he has time unaccounted for after this, and a story that is unverifiable. And some of that story actually doesn't check out against the facts. And so that is why we don't know what happened, and obviously no one's been arrested or charged with anything here. But talking to the people involved in this case, that is the name that continues to come up when people wonder, Does somebody know what happened to Tiffany? A lot of people think Ashley might know because of all the reasons I just listed. The troubling thing is he's not saying anything. Like, he's given his version of events, he's given his story, and that is basically what he is sticking to. So,
And it hasn't
unfortunately,
changed that much, other than that
no,
anomaly. What with the Esquire article about the phone,
yeah.
his story's stayed pretty consistent, from my understanding.
Yeah, and that leaves us in a place where if that is the leading theory that this is a gentleman who might be a person of interest and know more, well, it becomes about extracting that information either from him or from someone that maybe he shared it with, or if there was someone who helped him if he was involved, whatever that person knows. And the troubling thing is no one has talked, no one has said anything. I will, tell you that when we talked to Lisa in her interview, she spent a lot of time trying to track down the various people who knew Ashley and was around Ashley and her daughter at the time that they were dating. And she's gotten some information out of that. But a lot of it has been sort of more just out of reach, right? Suggestions of things that people believe might have happened, but they can't prove. So it's like there's never been the smoking gun of like, I was there, I helped, and here she is. And then we find her body. That's what this case needs. Somebody to just come forward and say what happened. And unfortunately, the sad truth of American crime is that 50% of homicides go unsolved. And a lot of these homicides are cases like this, where there are people that everyone is suspicious about. Like maybe this person knows something, maybe they were even involved, but proving that and getting enough information to take that to court sometimes is the barrier to closing these cases. So
Yeah,
without,
and just as a footnote, Ashley is out.
Mhm.
Very recently. I think within the time that we started researching this case, he got out of prison for the charges that he had caught during that raid when they were looking for evidence of what may have happened to Tiffany. So he's on the street again. And
Yeah,
for how long, who knows? I mean, based on this guy's history, he might not be out there that long. But right now, he is a free man, and he is out there.
yeah, and I will tell you guys, this isn't something that Myles and I arrived at on our own. I don't know who's responsible for this. I'm only telling you guys what we were told as far as persons of interest and why those people are persons of interest. Like, you're going to hear it from Lisa Daniels. You're going to hear it from Jesse, the district attorney that we spoke to. This is just where this case sits today. I think that once in a while you see a case like this where a lot of people are kind of leaning in one direction and a surprise piece of information comes out of left field and changes everything. But that hasn't happened here. It doesn't look likely that that's going to happen. I mean, this case is, boy, 2013 is a while ago at this point.
If Tiffany was alive today, she'd be 38 years old. I
I
mean,
know.
think
Yeah.
about that, how long she's been gone. And look, she may be alive. And as you
Yeah.
said, maybe she did find a good Samaritan and ran into a car and ended up on a Greyhound, and she's, living some off-grid life somewhere. It's just very, very hard to do that, and it's very, very rare that people are able to do that. She had
My,
a pretty hardcore drug problem. She had a kid. Like there, it's
Myles and I are never, if you watch our channel, we're never really big fans of the I disappeared to start a new life theory, which every missing persons case at some point, usually that comes up as like, hey, maybe they decided to walk away from it all. Like, hey, maybe Tupac is living in Costa Rica on the beach. Maybe Elvis is still alive. To me, it's more in that category of like, probably not.
there's a whole
Um,
culture of that in Japan
mhm,
where people literally move in the middle of the night. There's moving companies that move people in the middle of the night.
really, I've
And
never heard of that.
it's crazy. And I think it's Osaka that's like basically like a Skid Row now. And a lot of men, they just abandon their families and their jobs. They're caught in like a really, really hellish cycle of something. And they just take off. And there's a whole like economy built around like helping these guys leave. Um, I don't think that's what happened here with Tiffany. I mean, this was her running from danger, in the middle of a drug binge,
Yeah,
and it's disappearing in the middle of the night in a Walmart parking lot in Marietta, Georgia. It's
yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think that when you are living a lifestyle like she was, right, where you're sort of in trouble with the law a lot, the people you're associating with are also in trouble with the law, maybe even more than you are, you start to wonder if that's connected. And it's really hard to ignore that that might have something to do with it, right? It's certainly for me in the order of most likely to least likely. It comes ahead of a UFO abduction. It comes ahead of her getting in a car with a stranger. It comes ahead of her falling in a sinkhole in a nearby wooded area. There's a lot of stuff that could have happened to her, but this to me, it's still at the top. The people she was around, the things that she was around were not safe.
Let me
And
let me let me lay something out,
sure.
if I may. They're high. They've been partying at Weinstein's house, right? They go to Walmart. Ashley's got he's on parole. He's got God knows what in that truck. He's with his you know beautiful girlfriend, and she's tweaked out, and she starts stealing stuff when he's prepared to pay for things to get out of there. So he's paying in cash. She screws up his plan. He's tweaked out. She runs off. He finds her. Argument ensues. Something happens that isn't planned. She's small and delicate, and there's a picture. You can see what Ashley looked like. And Then he's got to deal with it, you know. To me, that's an extremely plausible scenario of what may have happened that night. I'm not saying anything was planned out, but I think if Ashley is responsible, I think it was probably something that just happened.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and then he made moves to cover it up. And God only knows if it's the first time that someone did something like that. But I that's what my gut tells me that what probably happened here.
Yeah, if that's where the answer lay, then that would probably be the theory of how it worked, right? Um, because it does make some sort of sense to imagine a guy who's got felonies. Maybe there's something in that truck, like a gun that shouldn't be there, or a large amount of drugs, or some stolen property, whatever. But
Things
that
that we
might
know he had because they found them when they got the warrant and raided his.
exactly. And so that would explain why he was not in a hurry to get in that truck and why he later cleaned it, that morning, which doesn't make sense. If my girlfriend goes missing, the last thing on my mind is a car wash. I'm just going to say that. But people, especially people on drugs, do weird things, and I do know that when you're on certain drugs, there's an urge to clean. That's a real thing. I maybe being a little bit too much of a devil's advocate because I think we can all agree this seems sort of suspicious, and the excuses are kind of flimsy for why you would do that. But
Yeah.
hey, no
And
one's been
listen,
charged, so
a devil's advocate was he just scared and he was cleaning drug residue out of his truck,
there you
you
go.
know,
Yeah. Well, and it
or
could
was
also
he
be.
cleaning out blood or something else?
And it could also be a combination of the two, where she legitimately did go missing and Ashley has no idea what happened to her, but he also does have something in that truck that he wants to get rid of because
Right.
now he's concerned something happened to my girlfriend and I have drugs or a gun or something's here. I need to get rid of it before the police come asking me questions and find it. And he actually, like, it could be both at once. We don't know. That's the thing. No one's been charged with anything. And so this is all completely speculative. But when you look at all the totality of the facts together, you just want to ask this one guy more questions. And I think that's what you're going to hear in our interview with the DA and with Tiffany's mom. All roads point back to this one person that you kind of just want to have more information from because what we have so far is weird. And it feels like there's probably more there that we're just not hearing about, right?
Yeah. But I do strongly feel that this is not a guy who could have taken care of whatever may have happened on his own.
Mm.
And that means that there's other people involved. And that gives me hope that eventually someone's going to talk. Because if it's just Ashley and he's been able to keep it quiet for this long, then guy may never fess up to what happened. But if there are other people involved, there's a greater chance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we all know, especially viewers of True Crime Unsolved, that when you have a conspiracy of people, a lot of times it's only just a matter of time until somebody decides to either get a conscience and say the right thing, or they get drunk and let slip, or they're in jail and they tell a cellmate, or they're in the trouble for something else and they decide to try to make a deal. Hey, I'll tell you what happened to Tiffany Whitton if you can reduce my charges for whatever I'm in jail for right now. There's a lot of reasons people come forward with this information. And it's actually a little shocking that nobody has yet, because I agree with you. I think there's probably more than one person who knows what happened to Tiffany. And the fact that no one has said anything, even living the sort of like on the edge lifestyle, that not only Tiffany, but the people around her were involved in. It just seems like, man, I'm surprised nobody's slipped up in one of the ways I just laid out yet. But it also gives you hope that in the future, that very well may happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time. It's been a long time. And
12 years, I think, to the month, right? If it was
yeah.
2013 and it's 2025 now. Yeah.
And there's a young girl who is, getting to the age where she's going to start asking questions if she isn't already. And her grandmother, who's raising her, is going to have to figure out how to talk to her about this. And if she had something solid to tell her of what happened to her mom and where her mom is now, whether that's in a place where they can go visit her grave, or whether that's, actually she's living in a commune in Portland. Um, I that's where my concern is with Lisa and with Tiffany's daughter, the one that Lisa's raising, that they can get some sort of closure and some understanding of what actually happened, because that's got to be really, really hard to grow up like that, not knowing your mother, not knowing where your mother is, probably having memories because she was old enough when she disappeared. But that's really rough.
Well, yeah, and I think that it kind of brings us full circle, right, to the fact that think what you will of what Tiffany was up to in her life when she disappeared. Think what you will about her past. She was young enough that she had a long future, and who knows what it could have held, but she certainly could have been there to be a mom for this little girl who is now missing her mom. She had a lot of years left to be a daughter for Lisa and a friend to all the people in her life that were still her friends. So, yeah, it's tough when you have a person like this who has just sort of a checkered past. It's easy for people to dismiss it or say, "Oh, well, that's what happens when you blah blah blah." I understand that instinct, but when you really look at someone's life and you realize they are somebody's kid, somebody's parent, it's heartbreaking. And I think at this point, for her family, all they want is to know what happened, right? I think we touched on it earlier. I'd be really surprised if there's anyone out there who really firmly believes Tiffany's still alive. I think most people accept that something bad happened to her and they just want to know what happened to her and maybe get her remains back so that they can just lay her to rest, have the answers that every family deserves to have, and move on. And that's really where this case is today. It's as much about that or more about that as it is about punishing the people responsible. Um,
Yeah. And look, there's lots of variables here. There's lots of possibilities. I know that we've really focused on Ashley. It's also possible that he reconnected with her and they went somewhere and partied and she OD'd. It's possible that
yeah.
she didn't connect with Ashley and she ended up with somebody else, some other group of people, and she OD'd and they got rid of her. There's maybe she did get trafficked. Maybe she did jump into a car and was sent over state lines or something. Anything's possible. But the main thing is just getting some answers for her family.
Exactly. And at this point, it just seems like it's like we said, someone's going to have to come forward with information. I think the physical evidence in this case is slim. We have the video and photographs of her in Walmart. We have, Ashley's story and the story from the people in the Walmart about the last time they saw her. And that's it. This isn't a story where we have a body and there's DNA and there's bullet casings and all the things that sometimes solve cases. We don't have any of that. This
Yeah.
woman walked out the door of a Walmart into the night and was never seen again. So,
And it's a very short timeline of what happened, right? It's a
yeah.
very short timeline, and like you said, there's no evidence other than this video footage, which really doesn't show us anything other than her running off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
All we know is that the guys at Walmart are telling the truth. That's it.
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know what else to say about Tiffany other than, we really hope that this video finds somebody who has a tip or has information. As we always do, we're going to put information up at the end of this video and in the description where you can call in with tips and with information. And I think the next most important step is check out our interview that's coming up with Lisa Daniels, her mom. Check out the interview with the DA, Jesse Evans. Both of these are really, really stellar interview subjects. These people had so much to say, way more than we got to in the breakdown. Believe me, these are always more of like a nutshell video. The details are in those interviews. So I would say check it out if you're interested in her case. There's so much more to learn.
Absolutely. And Jesse goes through a lot of stuff with the investigation, not just since he's been involved, but before he was on the case as well. So
Yeah.
it's definitely worth listening to that whole thing. As always, guys, if you like what we're doing, please like the video, drop a comment, subscribe, share it with your friends if you really like what we're doing. We appreciate all the support we've been getting, and we're going to keep this going.
Right on. Well, we'll see you guys next time, and thank you for watching.